Good evening and welcome to the Lincoln Election Hustings debate with BBC Radio Lincolnshire in association with the Lincolnite. I'm Rod Whiting with the honour of hosting tonight's debate from the Lawn in Lincoln, where we have all 7 candidates here on the stage who will be vying for your votes this coming Thursday. We'll be debating key questions submitted by our audience this evening. Wild applause, please, audience. Excellent job, you're hired. If you're wondering what our candidates look like, then you can see us by logging on to thelincolnite.co.uk, the Lincolnite, all one word, .co.uk, or it's the Lincolnite Live page on Facebook, where you'll be able to watch as well as listen to the debate, which will finish at 8:30, whereupon we'll hand over to Michael Hortin in our excitingly entitled Spin Room, where you'll be able to hear the analysis of what's been said by our candidates this evening. The constituency of Lincoln is what's known in the trade as a bellwether seat, an indicator of how the national election results might go on the night. It's one that's often changed hands between the Conservatives and Labour, as it did in the 2017 election, when Labour regained the seat it lost in 2010, Karen Lee displacing Carl McCartney by just over 1,500 votes. Well, that battle resumes tonight, with both candidates back on the stump and 5 other candidates here who will be hoping to cause a major political upset. Let's meet all of our candidates then. We drew lots to see who would start and where they would be positioned on the stage. We'll now hear a 90-second introduction from each of them, starting with Karen Lee.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Karen Lee, and for the past 2.5 years, I've been Lincoln's voice in Westminster. I've led work to tackle homelessness on our streets so that Lincoln now has a homelessness intervention centre based in City Hall, and I work with others to help secure Lincoln's medical school and the extra train services to and from London. I've fought to try and stop the closure of Lincoln's walk-in centre, RAF Scampton and Skellingthorpe GP surgery, and I spoke up for St Giles and Birchwood nursery schools who were threatened with closure in 2020 as a result of even more Tory government cuts. And I spoke up for sick and disabled people who'd had their benefits stopped. Believe it or not, this election isn't just about Brexit. Labour are proposing a way forward that unites our divided country and protects workers' and environmental rights. Because Boris Johnson's deal doesn't get Brexit done. It simply creates a new nightmare of our NHS being sold off to Trump. There'll be tariffs on goods and a border down the middle of the Irish Sea. But for me, the most important issue of all has got to be climate change. We must reduce the number of cars belching out exhaust fumes on our local roads and improve local housing so it's fuel efficient and environmentally sustainable. And implementing all of this will bring much-needed local jobs, jobs which pay a living wage so that people who work in those jobs don't have to queue at food banks. And if you, like me, want to see a kinder, better, fairer Lincoln, vote Labour on Thursday. Thank you.
Okay. That was Karen Lee, Labour. Now let's have Rob Bradley, Independent.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you. The theme of my campaign is people, not politics. This means me representing you as a person, not a politician. It means us all working together to achieve the best for Lincoln. The current form of governance of our country, the political system, isn't fit for purpose. The priority for parties is to retain power if in government or gain power if in opposition. This process involves making populist promises to get us to take the bait for their own ends, not for the good of our country. New manifesto pledges heard recently say that the economy, the NHS and so on will be much improved. Well then, why are they in such a bad state now? Brexit is an example of our poor governance. 3.5 years to get nowhere is shambolic. There's been squabbling, misinformation and party interest put first. It has been led by people without the necessary skills. It has made us a laughingstock. Millions of people are disillusioned with how we're governed. They are not inspired by our leaders, but they are dismayed by them. I've experienced the running of a business and being on the boards of local and national sporting organisations. There's a right way to run these things. It means being accountable and transparent. It means setting strategies for the long term. Sadly, the distraction of party politics prevents these simple principles being worked to when it comes to the biggest organisation of all, our country. A vote for me as an independent will mean you are represented by someone free from any other influence. I will set up a people's forum of good local people.
Let's finish now.
And we'll get expert advice when needed. We'll take our decisions out there
Thank you.
Locally.
Rob Bradley, that's your
nationally.
90 seconds. Sally Horscroft, Green Party.
Hello, I'm Sally Horscroft and I'm your candidate for the Green Party. I've lived in this city and worked and studied here since I was 12 and I love it, it's great. And I still live here. But I care deeply about our environment and I've campaigned on environmental issues for many years. And I care about people. Politics is about people. Politics affects everything you do, your education, how you travel, the food you eat, the air you breathe, the water you drink, the society you live in. And I'm angry about the mess our society is in. At the damage done to our poorest and most vulnerable, the rise in hate speech, racism and bigotry, the increase in homelessness, the rise in levels of poverty, the rise in food bank use, the underfunding of our hospitals, schools and local councils, all as the gap between the richest and poorest has widened and widened. But most of all, I'm angry at the lack of action on the environmental catastrophe facing us. I'm standing for the Green Party because the Green Party stands for two things: social equality, a fairer, more inclusive society for everyone, and a healthy environment. And because we have the policies based on science, research and evidence to really make a difference to our lives, our city and our planet. Thank you.
And now Charles Shaw, Liberal Party.
Hi, I'm Charles Shaw. My background is youth and community work and in business. Unlike the Lib Dems who sold out to the Tory party, the continuing Liberal Party stuck to our principles. We support a dynamic economy, encourage individual enterprise, social justice and the development of individuals and communities. And we put community first. The Liberal Party manifesto is actually put trust in the people. And we believe the nation needs to come together, with everyone working towards making Brexit a success. The Liberal Party acknowledges that the people have spoken, the rules of the referendum were clear, we must put our trust in the people. But trust in people goes way beyond the EU issue. It's about trusting people to keep as much of their own income as possible, trusting that they know what's best for themselves and their families. We're campaigning for a system of universal inheritance, where inheritance issues are levelled out and trusting people to give their children the best start in their adult life. We want to guarantee the rights of EU citizens who are already here, and we want to increase skills and vocational training for everyone. We want to restore democratic accountability to the NHS, which also means GPs being community controlled.
5 seconds.
And things along that line. All the best.
Carl McCartney, Conservative.
Thank you. Thank you and good evening everybody, and well done on winning the lottery and getting a place here at this evening's hustings and debates. As you've heard, my name's Carl McCartney and I'm the Conservative candidate in this general election. The general election that we're having because Brexit hasn't been delivered as yet. But I had the honour and privilege of being the Conservative Member of Parliament from 2010 to 2017. And I actually stood in 2005 as well when I promised to always put Lincoln first. And so I delivered the things that I promised in 2010. I said I was going to improve the opportunities for all who lived, worked, studied or visited Lincoln. And I made sure that I did that through improving transport infrastructure, whether that was the East-West Link, getting central government money for that, the bus station more recently, money from the Department of Transport. Obviously, since 1916, the Eastern Bypass had been talked about, not been delivered. I spent the first 3 years of my time as the Member of Parliament ensuring that we were going to get an Eastern Bypass. Still hasn't quite been finished, but it is underway, and we will get it, not before this Christmas, but maybe before next Christmas. But those are the things that I wanted to do. I said that I wanted to improve the train service, both cross-country train services to Lincoln and the surrounding East Midlands area, but also when I was elected in 2010, Lincoln was the only city in the country that didn't have a direct, quick link to the capital city. Changed that straight away with a very quick turnaround, having one train down and up a day, and as you've recently heard, last month we've got our 6 services down and up direct to London. And that helps put Lincoln on the map, something I think that any candidate who's lucky enough to be the Member of Parliament in Lincoln would want to do. Thank you very much for being here this evening. Look forward to the rest of the night. Thank you.
Caroline Kenyon, Liberal Democrat.
Today, the mask slipped. No longer the witty wag of, "Have I got news for you?" We saw the true self of Mr. Johnson, a man who snatched the phone of a reporter who was politely trying to show him a picture of a 4-year-old with an oxygen mask lying on a bed of clothes in an NHS hospital. A man who spoke of taking away the license fee from the BBC, one of our greatest treasures, our greatest exports, and a man who spoke of EU migrants who had the temerity to behave here as if it were their home. This is the election of our lifetimes. I'm an ordinary woman. I moved here from London 23 years ago. I'm a businesswoman, I'm a wife and a mother. 3.5 years ago, after the referendum, I thought I had to step up to the plate. I felt that the path our country was on was absolutely the wrong one. And I was proud to join the Liberal Democrats, who believe that our place as a United Kingdom should be at the heart of Europe, with our closest friends and allies, our greatest trading partners. How graphically is that illustrated as America and China are ripping chunks out of each other in a trade war, trade diminished by 1/4 in the last 12 months, an environmental catastrophe in the making. We need to be close to our partners. And as Liberal Democrats, as part of Europe, we are pledged to be with partners, to be part of a greater whole.
Thank you very much.
You.
And finally, Rhys Wilkes, Brexit Party.
Okay. So I'm standing as a candidate because I'm deeply concerned that the result of a democratic exercise is being ignored and our democracy has been assaulted. It's been over 3 years since we had the referendum and still it hasn't been delivered. We've had a parliament that's been completely paralysed, people who are not, politicians who are not listening to the will of the people. Lincoln itself voted by over 57% to leave the EU, the majority of Lincoln. And the Lincoln MP has gone off on a frolic of her own, not listening to her constituents. She's completely betrayed the people of Lincoln, and it's disgusting. It is vile. And I tell you what, she ought to be ashamed of herself, actually. I have to say that. And as a Democrat, I have to say that. We cannot start trashing results of referendums or elections purely because you don't like the result. That's all I've got to say.
Okay. Thank you, candidates. Now, we do, of course, want to hear what our candidates have to say on the important issues, but time is tight, and we have a lot of questions to get through, so I will be moving the debate on as much as possible. You will get your chance, audience. My colleague, Veronica Jedrak, will pass amongst you with a microphone. Veronica, give them a wave. There we are. And I will try to get as many voices on as I can, but time is tight, so let's get straight to the first question, which comes from Georgina Garrett Camplin, who is a Remainer who voted Conservative in the last election. Georgina. Are you here, Georgina? That's a good start, but I can tell you, her question was, how can the UK remain competitive after Brexit? Carl McCartney.
Well, that's a very good question, and I think the UK will not only remain competitive, but become even more competitive than it already is in a global market. We're not going to stop, obviously, trading with the rest of the EU. We're going to continue trading with the EU, but that's not the rest of the world. There's the BRIC countries, there's the Asian countries, there's China, there's America, there's Australia, there's New Zealand, all the Commonwealth countries, South America. They all want to trade with us. And there's no harm in doing that, as well as trading with the EU. So I think not only will the UK remain competitive, I think we'll go from strength to strength once we've obviously delivered Brexit and moved onward.
Can we just deal with the Get Brexit Done mantra, which is oft repeated, isn't it? Which seems to suggest that at the 31st of January, we're going to be out, it's all going to be done and dusted, when actually, as we all know, that's just a very small part of the overall negotiations that have got to take place. I'll just very briefly go through some research which has been done by our reality check team. The EU is not allowed by law to conduct any formal negotiations on a trade deal until after the UK has left, 31st of January, if Boris Johnson is made Prime Minister. The other 27 EU countries would then need to approve a joint negotiating mandate. That's a process which will take about 6 weeks if things go well. So it's unlikely that formal trade negotiations would begin until mid-March, leaving very little time, about 7 months, to actually get down to the detail and ratify whatever deal is going to be got with the EU. Is that feasible?
Well, first of all, I'm very pleased that you put your name in the hat to get your question asked this evening. It's a nice long one. But I'm obviously not a doomsayer like yourself. I'm a bit more positive than you are. So, well, I'm just about to. I think it was a very long question. I might give a long answer. Boris Johnson's done very well. We were all told that he wasn't going to get a withdrawal agreement. He wasn't going to get it reopened, and he wasn't going to be able to renegotiate it. He did all of that within 90 days of becoming Prime Minister. So, yes, we've got until December of 2020 to obviously move forward on a trade agreement. I think we should get that done well before then. When Article 50 was implemented, it was up to 2 years. It didn't have to be 2 years. Actually, we've had a better negotiating team. It could have been done in 6 months.
Well, how many trade deals have we negotiated so far?
Well, as you just said, we're not allowed to because we're part of the EU. We're one of 28 countries at this point in time. But come the 31st of January, let's be a lot more positive with Boris Johnson as a Prime Minister who's told us we're going to be leaving the EU before then. With the majority government, we will have left the EU and we'll move forwards and onwards.
Karen Lee.
Thank you. Well, I've spent the whole of the summer going around firms in Lincoln, Dynex, Dawson's, by Frangie, Siemens, Lindum, as well as a number of small firms, and they all told me that what they need to remain competitive locally, we're talking about this is a Lincoln debate, they need access to single market, customs union, and we should have no border down the Irish Sea and keeping workers and environmental protections. They agreed with all of that. So I promise you, despite the actually really blatant personal attack, I haven't done any frolicking.
Don't start accusing me
I didn't interrupt when.
Don't accuse me of personal attacks.
Okay, let's
Can I
continue,
finish?
Karen.
I actually worked hard all summer going around local firms. I promise I didn't do any frolicking. I went round local firms and I was working really hard. And they told me what they need, and it's exactly what Labour have said in their manifesto that they will do. They will go back to Brussels, because we actually want some sort of a deal if we're going to leave. We want a proper deal so that we don't lose jobs locally. We'll go back to Brussels and we'll get a decent deal. We will bring that back, and people will have the choice of leaving with a sensible deal or remaining.
Okay. Karen, when you discussed with the businesses what it is they most needed, did they not tell you that they needed an end to uncertainty? And isn't what you're saying going to lead to another 6 months
they need an end to
uncertainty?
uncertainty, because I think you'll know that Dawson's were on short time in the summer because there was this uncertainty. But actually, the last thing they need is tariffs on goods, because that would make everything so much more expensive and it would actually cost jobs.
Okay, let's go to Rhys Wilts, Brexit Party, please.
Okay, so I'm in favour, the Brexit Party is in favour of the Canada-style deal, 97% free trade deal. When we leave the EU, we're not going to suddenly have tariffs whacked on us. They'll want to negotiate with us. But what we've had now is because we've had quite a strong force in Parliament that's wanted to remain, we've essentially been the submissive ones, and they've thought that they can get away with anything, essentially. So, yeah, that's all I've got to say. I'm keeping it.
How long do you think we need to do the full deal with the EU?
Well, this links in with what what I would say Carl said. Carl's mentioned that we can't actually do any trade deals right now because we're in the EU.
Or effectively, because Boris Johnson has turned down the opportunity of an extension to 2022, we have effectively got as I've explained before, 7.5, maybe 8 months to get the deal done. Normally, to get a full trade deal done, we're talking several years. So how likely is it that we're going to get a full deal? Are we going to end up in another 7-8 months' time on another cliff edge?
Well, we could have dealt with this already, but it's been dragged on for so long. So no, it's not rubbish. It's fact. Sorry, that's amazing rubbish. It's fact.
Okay, Caroline Kenyon.
Well, I want to pick up on a number of points with which you'll be unsurprised to hear I disagree. Firstly is that just by having Boris Johnson as our Prime Minister and being positive is some kind of panacea for incredibly complex issues. And he did not renegotiate the withdrawal agreement. It was the original agreement put to us by the EU, which Theresa May rejected, which he dusted off, represented, and then sold the DUP down the river. So that's issue number one. So, issue number two, will we be more competitive post-Brexit? Well, I export services. There is nothing holding me back as a small business within the EU. I set up a business in America last year. It's small. It sounds really swanky. It's very small. It's never going to make me rich. But I did it. Nothing held me back. Germany trades 5 times as much with China as we do. The problems lie here and not with the EU.
Okay. I just want to put to you a question that was put by Paul Harrison, a Leaver who voted UKIP in the last election. Why do the Liberal Democrats think that going against a democratic vote to leave the EU is a good policy?
Well, I've said this several times, so forgive me if you've heard me say it already. I have total respect for people who voted to leave. But I do not...
Well, but your party has made their sole issue revoke Article 50.
May I continue?
Yes.
Thank you. So I do not respect the process of the referendum. It was flawed with illegalities, with data theft and foreign interference. And I want to see the Russia report, and so does 66 million other people.
Was it a mistake for Jo Swinson to bet the whole House on revoke?
Well, it has always been our preferred choice to put the deal as agreed back to the people. We went to the House of Commons 17 times with a motion to try and get a people's vote, and sadly it failed. Now, we all recognise that this election is a proxy referendum, so it's a second choice. It's not best. But as things stand, with a pretty ramshackle political system that we've got, were we to be in the situation of having a majority in the House of Commons, and were we therefore to be in government, yes, we would therefore have a mandate to revoke.
Okay, thank you. Charles Shaw, Liberal Party. Charles Shaw.
Somebody talking.
I will come to the audience in a moment. Thank you. I will come to the audience in a moment. Thank you. Charles Shaw, Liberal Party.
Right. Well, this comes to a situation where, unfortunately, I hate to admit it, but age sort of half works for you. As a teenager, and I've said this in other forums, I was at a focus group with Harold Wilson, Ted Heath, and Peter Jay, who was reporter, on when we've just gone in to the EU. And the documentation and stuff there was the reports from the Lord Chancellor, who said this is going to be a problem for Britain. And whether we like it or not, what happened then, lots of people say they didn't have the facts then. Have any of you read the Treaty of Rome, or the early treaties, or what we're in, or what we're a member of? You haven't. Probably some of you must have done. The same situation is now, and I'm glad Rod read out the point about the law there, because it's the law about what the EU can do, as much as what we can do. If someone is its own country, a sovereign nation, what you do, you decide to do, hopefully in a reconciled sort of way, to do what is the best for your country. And clearly, a lot of people feel leave is the best. And a lot of people feel that remain is the best. But what you will notice in this is it would be quite simple to give you the treaties, to see what the country's signed up to, and read it. And you don't get that from the government.
Charles, thank you. We will hear from the other two candidates, but I just quickly want to go to the audience at this point. If you'd like a show, let's give a show of hands. Perhaps somebody would like to make a comment, and Veronica will arrive with, there's a chap here on the front row. If you wait for the microphone to arrive, and then we can get a point from you.
Testing, good. I voted Remain, but I wanted to understand how you set up a business in the US without a trade deal.
Well, it's very straightforward. It's a bread awards. It's a bread competition for American bread bakers. The website where they enter is every entry that they pay for is a sale, but it's a service sale, so the income comes here, and we went to America and delivered a bread awards.
So I would be accurate in saying that you can do business without needing a trade deal with other countries?
Well, we have a relationship with America.
I should qualify that I voted Remain. And I would vote Remain again tomorrow, but I respect the will of the referendum, and I also have a US business. And you can find ways when you need to do business. And the biggest threat to small business is Labour's taxes.
All right. Any other comments? Any other comments from the audience? No? All right. Rob Bradley, as an independent, what do you think to this situation?
Well, first of all, as an independent, my campaign is based on listening to the people of Lincoln. And clearly in 2016, the people of Lincoln voted to leave by 60%, if you take the entire constituency, 55, whatever. It was a majority to leave the EU. So I can't ignore that as an independent because I want to be the people's voice for this area. I think that, quite honestly, the negotiations have been extremely poor. Theresa May, with the social skills of a deceased badger, was completely sold on reaching a deal herself. She didn't involve her cabinet, she didn't involve her party, and she only started to involve all parties when it was too late. I think from now, there should be all-party negotiations, a unified voice, because it's that serious a situation. If I can compare Brexit with the 110 metres hurdle race, which may seem slightly bizarre, we've just got out the blocks and we haven't even reached the first hurdle. And there's a lot of negotiating to be done. The biggest thing that worries me personally is the impact on Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And Boris Johnson, with his cavalier bluster, is not the person to be dealing with such a sensitive issue. All of this talk tonight has been about money and trade. We're talking of the welfare and safety of people in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. Sally?
The original question takes us back to how can the UK remain competitive after Brexit? I think it's going to be very difficult. Carl talked about trade deals with the rest of the world. We already trade with the rest of the world. With different trade deals. We have trade deals with the rest of the world as part of our membership of the EU. Trade deals which have been negotiated over the years. To replace those trade deals is going to be very difficult, very time-consuming. When they say, let's get Brexit done on the 31st of January, that will be the beginning of years and years of renegotiation.
All right, thank you. I'd like now to move on to the second question, which again is a very big issue in the country, which is from Patrick Cant, who voted Labour in the last election, but is undecided in this election, so everything to play for. Okay, Patrick, your question. So let's bring the microphone.
Well, how can you relieve the pressure on Lincoln County Hospital?
How can you relieve pressure on Lincoln County Hospital? Karen Lee.
Well, thank you for your question. I worked at Lincoln County Hospital for 14 years until a couple of years ago. So I've got some idea of what goes on there. I worked on the cardiac unit, and I still keep in touch with my friends. I meet them every 6 weeks or so, and we go and eat at the Cosy Club. And I have people who send me messages when it's particularly bad in A&E and let me know what's going on. How can you relieve the pressure? With proper investment. Labour have got a 10-point plan for the NHS. We need more nurses, and we really need more nurses. We don't need 50,000, that's actually 31,000. We need more nurses, and we'll only get those more nurses if we bring back the bursary. Tories took it away in 2016. They want to bring it back now. They've obviously seen, they've been enlightened. They should never have taken it away in the first place. We need so many things. I mean, to bring it back locally, they got rid of the walk-in centre, didn't they? What was it, 96% or something of people said they didn't want it to go. So what did the powers that be do? Because their money had been cut, we got rid of the walk-in centre. And now the queues at A&E are even worse, and the ambulances queue around the corner. So the short answer to your question is, we'd properly fund the NHS. And I'm not talking about what Prime Minister Johnson talks about putting in what he took out. I'm talking about properly funding it. 26 billion.
Carl McCartney.
Thank you, Rod. Well, one of the things I did as a Member of Parliament between 2010 and 2017 was ensure that I was helping not just Lincoln General Hospital, but also all the medical services across Lincolnshire, in the fact that one of the things that we knew was the retention and attraction of medical staff, not just doctors, but nurses as well, but all medical staff needed to be addressed. And by doing that, one of the things that I pushed for from 2011, working with the university, was to have a new medical school, which we saw open earlier this year. I don't know why you're laughing. I think that's quite a good thing. And that's going to help not only Lincoln, that's not only going to help Lincoln, it's also going to help the rest of Lincolnshire.
Caroline Kenyon.
As Liberal Democrats, we have two strands of policy that directly go to supporting the NHS. One is to stay in Europe. 1 in 5 nurses come from the EU and 1 in 11 doctors. And since the referendum, the number of nurses applying from the EU has plummeted by 90%. That's catastrophic. We already have a shortage of over 40,000 nurses. So we really rely on our EU national friends to support us in the NHS. And then our second policy is to very simply costed 1 penny in the pound on our taxes, specifically ring-fenced for the NHS, and that's 7 billion a year, which is 35 billion over the lifetime of the Parliament.
Let me just ask the question, who would be willing to pay an extra 1% of tax towards the NHS? It's not scientific, but there's quite a lot of hands going up there. It's interesting. Okay. Sally Horscroft.
How can we reduce pressure on the NHS? Well, yes, proper funding, increased staffing. The 50,000 new nurses from the Tories, if you take away the 19,000 they're hoping to retain, it's 31,000 nurses over 10 years. I worked it out today. I found it very difficult to find out how many NHS hospitals there actually are in the UK, but the best I could come up with was about 350. That works out about 10 new nurses per hospital per year, if none leave. It's not going to go very far. The other thing you can do to help reduce pressure on the NHS is to reduce air pollution. I know it sounds a bit out there. Air pollution, every time air pollution spikes, you get spikes in admissions, emergency admissions to A&E for heart attacks, strokes, breathing problems. Air pollution is recently been shown to increase rates of brain cancer and to inhibit lung development in children. That's all more pressure on our NHS. So if you look after the environment, you reduce the pressure on the NHS.
Thank you. Reece Wilkes.
The best way of reducing the pressure, especially on A&E, is by having 24-hour GP surgeries. Because if you are ill during let's say the night, where do you go? You go to A&E because everything else is closed, and that's putting pressure. You're waiting around there for maybe 6 hours at A&E to be seen. And so, yeah, I would say 24-hour GP surgeries are the best way forward with this. To relieve, you specifically mentioned Lincoln, didn't you? So that was, yeah. Because that,
Given the shortage of GPs we have at the moment, how
well,
are you
where am I
going to
gonna-
practically do
sorry,
that?
where are we going to get the doctors? Okay, well, what's happening now is we essentially steal doctors from poorer countries in the EU, so let's say Romania, and we're not investing in our own, so we're taking away doctors from poorer countries, and they're coming here. I think that we shouldn't be essentially stealing them. I think we should be investing in our own people.
Rod,
Because I don't-
please
we're
not
just
know
making them-
that Skellingthorpe GP surgery has just been closed against the wishes of the residents. So where we're going to get these extra GPs from,
All right.
who knows?
I just want to hear from Charles Shaw and Rob Bradley, and then I'm going to ask Carl and Karen a question. Charles.
Right, well, I'm not sure how the 24 hours would work, but and GPs do need a rest, and we do have locums and all sorts of other things. But I think the problem we have in the NHS, which does immediately impact on this, is that we've been sold the idea for so long that big is better. And as a result of which, we've amalgamated things, closed community hospitals, reduced a lot of services, and sold on the theory of centres of excellence, which is useful for certain things. But effectively, what we've created is a sort of monolith at which the workforce and nurses and other people aren't particularly empowered to do the job well that they want. So I think we need to look at the whole model. In terms of GPs, I've already said, I think we need community control of GPs, and we don't need to be sold what I regard as the utter crap that great governance models and directors and trusts are the right way to run the NHS.
Okay.
It actually needs to be locally
Thanks, Charles.
accountable.
Rob Bradley.
Well, the morale of the health service has been wrecked over time, and I think that's a tragedy. I think nurses and doctors, we talk of help for heroes with the armed services. I think that should include doctors and nurses because they're on the front line of our health. And I think, I don't know how and why, but successive governments, how they've run the national health, has wrecked the morale in that organisation, which I think has reduced productivity, but is terrible for the people who work there.
But they're not dying in the front line, are they?
Well, I'm going to ignore that because I think that's a bit flippant. The problem is, which is what I said in my opening statement, that government is often short-termism because the successful party wants to be re-elected, so makes semi-popular decisions that are instant, and there's no long-term planning. And in my view, bearing in mind I'm representing people, so I want to hear people's views in the future, we need a longer-term plan for the health and well-being of people in this country.
Okay.
So we need to educate them about health, fitness, better diet, not smoking, not taking drugs, not drinking too much.
All right.
That will then impact on the national health.
Thank you, Rob. On this issue of, I don't know whether it's a hypothecated tax, but a tax, an extra 1% on income tax to pay for a better funded NHS care system. Carl McCartney, would you support that for a Conservative government?
Well, I think the Conservative governments in the past, and the fact that we've been in government for 44 years of the 71 years that the National Health Service has been in existence, we have cared for and looked after the NHS. And we've ensured that it's still the great organisation that it is today. Let me finish. You want to add another supplementary? Far away.
Well, I was just going to suggest that actually normally the funding has been around about 4% of the budget. Over the last few years, it's been quite a bit less than that.
Well, there's a reason for that, isn't there, Rod? Because up until 2010, obviously, we had a Labour government who actually squandered all the money that we had. And there was a note left that said, there is no money left.
Would you support, I'll let Karen come back on that in a moment, would you support an extra 1%
I don't support raising taxes at all, Rod, because I'm actually against a larger state. I actually think the state should take as little off people as possible. There still needs to be a safety net. Whether we ring-fence monies for the NHS, I'm very happy to see the money that we've put aside and the more money that's going to go into the NHS. But to do that, we have to have an economy that is working and is expanding.
But you saw the show of hands in the room.
That's what we have
You've
with the
heard
Conservative
about
government.
the crisis that the NHS has been in. I mean, we've heard about 12-hour waiting lists, that awful photograph. I know sometimes these things on social media can be distorted, but that photograph of a young child with pneumonia lying on the floor, it's very powerful, that sort of stuff. So is it wrong to have an extra tax maybe hypothecated for the NHS?
Well, it depends. If you're going to ring-fence taxes just for the NHS or for lots of other things, I would say that obviously as a nation state, as a government, as a Conservative government, we want to tax people the least amount and let them decide what to spend their money on.
Okay.
They're the ones who earn it.
Karen Lee, would you support a 1% extra tax on...
Well, first of all, I'll come back about the bankers caused the global financial crisis. It started in America, actually. So, but the trouble is, if you could let me finish, Mr. McCartney, the trouble is all of our public services have been decimated. We don't have enough teachers in schools. We don't have enough police officers. We don't have enough firefighters. Local government is absolutely cash-strapped. We don't have enough money for social services, all of those things. So I appreciate what you say about the hypothecated tax. The principle, yes, but actually our plan to take a little bit more tax off the top 5% of people in this country who earn over 80 grand, and we hear this red herring about the marriage allowance. It's 250 quid a year, £2 a month. I'm talking about people earning over 80 grand a year should be paying a bit more tax, and the ones earning more than 125,000 a bit more, and that will pay for all of those public services, not just the NHS.
Would it pay? Just a second. Would it pay though for the extra £50 billion that Jeremy Corbyn announced for the WASPy women pensions,
That will be
which hasn't been
treated-
costed?
No. Well, I'll tell you something, the Tory manifesto hasn't been costed at all. That will be paid for in the way that you would pay off as a one-off if you'd lost a court judgment. It will be paid for in that way. And if those women are on universal credit or some other benefit, because it's a one-off payment, it won't affect them. And we will put right the wrong that the WASPy women have suffered.
Just to finish off, you saw the show of hands for the 1%. They are happy to pay that, and I don't know how many of our audience are in the top 5%
Can I just ask, who earns more than 80 grand a year? Well, there you go.
So they are prepared to
No,
pay.
I don't, actually.
They are prepared to pay an extra 1%. You're excluding them from that opportunity.
They're welcome to chip in if they want, but I would happily pay more tax. And actually, Rob just said I earn more than £80,000 a year. I don't, actually. I earn less. Just under.
All right, OK. Let me go to the audience on this, and then I will bring in other panel members. So the lady here, are we going to go on to WASPy?
So am I.
Here's the microphone. Here's the microphone.
None of us have had our letters yet. A lot of us don't even know that when we're going to be told when we're going to get a pension.
How many parties have offered to compensate you and put the wrong right?
Yeah, but you started it.
But how many have offered to put it right? Answer the question. How many have put it right?
Okay, but where are you going to get the money from?
I've just told you.
No, I don't. I don't see where the money's coming from.
Other hands, please. Chris Burke, Councillor Chris Burke, Labour councillor.
Well, Labour councillor Tom Dyer. There's a few councillors in here.
Thank you, Rogers.
I'm just making sure the audience know, that's all.
What I would like to ask is not only the fear that the Tories will continue to underfund the NHS, but what about this trade deal they're doing with America?
Yes.
What about these leaked documents?
Yep.
And why don't they release all the documents then to reassure us that Boris Johnson unusually is telling the truth?
Carl, do you want to come back on that? Because that's, I think, aimed squarely at the Conservative.
Well, is it? Because where did the document originate from?
Reddit.
Well,
yeah. And who put it there? Which companies were involved in spreading the information? And what's Jeremy Corbyn trying to defend?
It's the content of the documents that matter, not how they got into the public domain.
And the content of the documents was how old?
They show the ongoing discussions between the British government and the American trade mission.
Which ministers were there in those meetings? Which ministers?
I can't answer you specifically.
Well, Corbyn was asked that question. What was his answer? None.
Boris
Well,
Johnson
I'm not Corbyn's spokesman,
He's a
but I'm just very interested in the content of the documents.
OK, any more questions? Gentleman right at the back. I could just about see him through the spotlights.
Thanks. It seems to me, and I'm not an economist, so I better declare that up front, it seems to me that no one on the panel is really being honest about the NHS, or indeed any other service, with the electorate. there are only really two ways in which people can fund the services that they want. It's either through taxation or through borrowing. How's that going to work in the current climate when we have doubled the national debt to something like, is it running at 1 trillion at the moment? I'd really like to know that, and I'd like some honest answers from the politicians.
Rob.
The problem is we never know the facts. We're governed, we've got a party political system, but we never, as the public, know the facts. There's never a plan for the UK. I've been involved in sporting organisations, Lincoln City, Lincolnshire Cricket, my own business. We have a plan. We have a business plan. We have a vision and what we want to achieve. Why can't we, as the public, log on to the UK plan and get to know where the money comes from to fund that, where the money is taken out, what the plan is for this country? Well, that might answer your question, but no, we're kept in the dark by the party political system.
There is something called an internet where you can look for the information.
There's not a comprehensive plan. There's not a...
Our manifesto is fully costed.
Manifestos are fairy tales.
All right. Let's go back to our original question and the person who asked it, Patrick, and let's just see what he makes of what he's heard. Patrick?
Thank you. Well, it's pretty obvious that it's going to need increased funding and increased recruitment. But I think it also needs political will, and I don't believe for a second that the Conservatives have got a political will to support the National Health Service.
Absolutely.
I think they probably see it as a business opportunity for some of them. So I'm...
Carl is saying investment is coming in. We hear they're investing in new hospitals. I think it's 6, and 4 of those are refurbishments.
Well, he said 40, didn't he?
But they are promising more hospitals. They've just put a medical school in Lincolnshire.
There was a very good...
Parliament down, but they did.
Yeah, there was a very good fact check on his 40 hospital claim the other day, which he was shown to be completely untrue. So anything Boris Johnson says, I think you can forget about.
You're not a believer?
Certainly not in this current government, no.
Carl, do you feel comfortable with Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, as the leader of your party?
Certainly, because he said what he's going to do. He's going to get Brexit done and we're going to leave the EU, which is what the result of the referendum was in 2016. And ever since then, we've had procrastination from various members of Parliament, including the one we had from the Labour Party here in Lincoln, who promised that she would deliver the results of the referendum that the majority of people voted for in Lincoln, and has spent the last 2.5 years doing everything she can to thwart it.
Can people trust him?
Yeah. And they can trust me. You've seen the things that I've said I was going to deliver. I've always told people I was going to put Lincoln first. I said we'd get an eastern bypass. I said we'd get direct trains to London. I said we'd get an east-west link. I said we'd get different infrastructure projects underway. They've all been delivered.
Hang on a second. Boris Johnson said to the DUP he would never put a border down the Irish Sea, and that's what we now have.
Do we?
He threw them under a bus, didn't he?
No.
He didn't.
No.
So why do the DEXU documents now say there are going to be tariffs in between Northern Ireland and Great Britain? Is that a fairy tale?
No, but I wouldn't say it's a fairy tale. No,
No, but I'm sorry, you seem to be rather like in Alice in Wonderland, able to believe 2 different opposing positions at the same time.
No, I believe that
there's no barrier, no border down the Irish Sea, and yet there are no tariffs. Seem contradictory to me.
All right. I think we need to move on to our next question now, which is from Vanessa Thorne, a Conservative voter in the last election. Vanessa, your question, please.
How do you plan to tackle the problem of rough sleepers in the city, especially in relation to drug abuse?
Carl McCartney.
Thank you very much for coming to me first again, and thank you very much for your question. It's an issue that's been around for a long time, unfortunately. And obviously, I've been speaking with the Police and Crime Commissioner, who has put some funding into ensuring there were some outreach workers, which the City Council and County Council had not decided to fund, because we need to have those agencies and organisations in place who are perhaps better than central government diktats, shall we say, to ensure that those people who need help and support are offered and given that. And we have some wonderful organisations in Lincoln, whether that's Nomad YMCA or even the Street Pastors, who both before my time as the Member of Parliament and when I was a Member of Parliament, I spent some time with, who know where some homeless people will go to keep out the way, if you like. They know where their hiding places are. and they check up on them and make sure that they're safe. Obviously, we'd all like there not to be homeless people on the streets, and that's something that, Joe, you want to come back?
Sorry, I just want to add a little bit to it. I work up in the Bailgate area, and I've noticed over the last year, 18 months, an increase in homeless. Drug addicts, clearly drug addicts, they're certainly on something. The Bailgate is a beautiful area, and it is being spoilt by just a few individuals, but they are there, and they either need help, they need something.
Indeed, there's organisations like Bailgate Guild as well as Lincoln Big who obviously are working with the various different agencies, and it's obviously something that we'd all like to tackle. I think every one of us as a candidate here, and whoever's lucky enough to be the Member of Parliament after Thursday, would want to ensure that obviously various steps are taken to minimise the homeless people.
What steps?
Well, working with the various agencies, as I've just said. If you want to repeat it all, I'm very happy to take up the time, Rob. But,
Let me get a microphone now.
Sorry. Yeah, I live in the Bailgate. Those agencies are already there. So what are you going to do that's different to help it? The situation's got worse. The agencies are already there. So what are you going to do instead of that, in addition to?
Well, the agencies have obviously got to... There's a problem there that needs to be dealt with. Obviously, if there's agencies in place, it's ensuring that they have the right amount of people in place to ensure that everybody who is homeless is being dealt with and offered the support that they need, whether they are homeless through various different reasons to do with their family life, or whether they do have maybe drug issues, as the lady just said who asked the question.
With you as an MP, though, if you were MP, people will be coming to you for ideas, won't they? They'll be looking for you to create some sort of initiatives to tackle it. Yeah. I think we're just trying to get a sense for what you would do.
As I said, I've worked in the past with both Nomad and the YMCA. I've also already in the past few months been speaking with Mark Jones, the Police and Crime Commissioner, because obviously, and you know, yes, he's a Conservative, but he knows that he has to deal with the issue as well, not just in Lincoln, but across the whole of Lincolnshire.
I will go back to our questioner in a minute. I just want to bring Karen Lee in.
Yeah, I want to come in here. Do you know, these must be the most uncomfortable seats in the world. I'm sorry if I keep shuffling.
Don't blame the BBC.
One of the first things I did when I took office in 2017, you'll remember that long, hot summer, there were people on the streets, and it was just so clear to see homelessness had exploded. I mean, it's gone up by 169% over the last decade of Tory government. So one of the first things I wanted to do, I went out on the streets at 5 a.m. in the morning with my office manager and P3, who are the local organisation that support homeless people. And that morning we found 40 people on the streets. And it's still cold in August at that time in the morning. So just imagine what it must be like now, being one of those people. You know, when they're littering your shop doorway. I'm sure they don't want to. But the point is, we went out and I wanted to see what the problem was. That's the sort of MP that I was. I don't want just a briefing.
But what specifically will you do?
I'm coming to that if I can.
Okay.
Everybody else has had time to answer. So what I did, I put together a task force group. I put together a group that included the police, the city and county councils, because actually the budgets for the support agencies for homeless people go to the county council, which is Conservative control. And healthcare providers, all those kind of people, we came together, over a series of meetings, we looked at what the problem was, where it was, how we could make a difference, who we could work with. And the result of that was the intervention team in City Hall, which now goes out. Do you know there wasn't even an outreach worker going out? You talk about people with drug problems. There was no outreach worker from Ad Action going out to those people because it had been cut by the Tory-controlled county council. And now there's an outreach worker, there's a number of workers. So we are, if I can finish, because this is one of the biggest pieces of work that I did, and I did it immediately. It's a huge problem. So we have actually done something, but we haven't cured the problem, not by any means. And Labour will put money in that will increase support for people. We're going to build homes, and some of those homes will be saved specifically for people who are homeless. We'll train them so that they can work. It's no good just giving someone a home. You've got to give them a way of life that's different, a way of changing their life. But as a local MP, I did an awful lot about homelessness, but believe me, there's an awful lot more to do.
Let's go back to Vanessa. You've listened to both Karen and Carl. Are you assured at all, reassured that there is action going to be taken, is being taken?
I'd like to think there is. I've lived in the city for 24 years now. I've seen a difference, a lot of change in Lincoln in the time I've been here. I think it's gone downhill from when I moved here from Scotland 24 years ago. I don't know. I hope I hate to walk down the street and just see these poor souls.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm
a lot of
sure-
it, they obviously maybe self-inflicted. You know, they choose to take drugs, possibly, I don't know. But it's just not nice. You know, like I say, I work in the Bailgate, beautiful place, great for tourism. And what do visitors to our city see? They see people lying in the doorways. I don't know whether I want to say this out, but just covered in their own vomit. You know, I walk down to work in the morning and I just see, I actually just a few weeks ago saw a young man lying in the car park entrance to the White Hart, just covered in his own vomit, clearly in a bad way. It's just awful to see, and obviously it's awful for the people who are living like that as well.
It's our society.
Okay, Caroline,
Well,
do you want to just come in on
Yes,
this?
I mean, I think what you've described is so moving, and it's a symptom of something that's so wrong in our society. And I agree with Karen, we need to build more social housing. Liberal Democrats want to build 100,000 more social houses every year. But also, and I mentioned about putting a penny on the pound in taxes for the health service, we do want absolute parity of mental health with physical health, because these people are suffering from mental health issues. You know, there's an explosion of mental health problems, and alcohol addiction and drug addiction is just the way that they are expressing this wound, this invisible wound that's inside them.
So you want to set up more teams?
We absolutely need to invest in treating people before they, I mean, that's the very last point at which people can be rescued. We need to be catching them far further back in the process. They now say that you can...
Reece?
Well, I've got first-hand experience of this, because when I was 17, I used to be homeless. And I can tell you now that homeless people get fobbed off, not just by Lincoln Council. It's not just Lincoln, by the way, this is across the country. Homeless people, if you go to the council and you ask, this, I know this happens across the country because I spoke to Shelter about this, and you say you're homeless, they'll use something called a close connection test. And what that is they want you to prove that you have a connection, either a family member there or you've got even a friend there. So you say, yes, I've got someone I know. They'll say, oh, well, you should stay with them then. You need to stay with them. Whoever they are, you should stay with them. And they may not even be in a situation they may be in a one-bedroom flat. They're very, very small. They may not... So I'm just explaining that they do get fobbed off, homeless people. And they get treated like trash, really.
How would you solve it, Reece? We've heard what the other candidates have been saying. How would you solve this issue?
Well, the problem, I believe, is I'm saying the obvious, there's not enough accommodation. And it's about supply and demand. We need more housing. And the problem is, when you go home tonight and you go into your house, you're not, just going to sound corny, but I don't care. You're not just going into a physical building. You're going to a place of refuge. It's not just a physical building. It really isn't. It provides security for you. And it really does, being homeless does change your view on even looking at a house. I can tell you now, it really does. And in terms of mental health problems and alcoholism and drug use, can you blame them? Because you've got no accommodation whatsoever, so you've got to alleviate the problem.
Reece, I'm going to stop you there. Can we just take that lady there who's got her hand up, just see what she says?
Hello. I work for the local mental health trust, and mental health problems are absolutely, it's an epidemic. And these people that find themselves in these situations, in actual fact, many of us in this room are 1 or 2 paychecks away from living in that same life. You need to start role modelling. You need to start looking after people. You need to start treating people as human beings. Give them respect. Give them hope. Listen. One of the first things about looking after other people is listening. Listening to their story and treating them as a person, as a whole.
Can Are you persuaded, are you encouraged by anything you've heard on the stage?
Yes, I'm pleased that Karen started what she did. I'm aware of the P3 service. They do an amazing job over the flooding that we had recently. I found a tent hidden away. I contacted the service. They went that night. They went to check. This tent and whoever was in it was at risk of being flooded and possibly drowning if they find themselves to be on anything. But yeah, but it's the tip of the iceberg, and we need more. And yeah, we need more, please.
Right. Thank you. Time's pressing on, so we're coming now to what we call our quick fire round, which is it's very exciting. So the way this works is I'm going to ask a question. Well, it's not me, it's somebody else's question. There's only 2 rounds of this. But we want quick-fire answers from our candidates, 30 seconds, okay? Are you ready? Luke Gibbons, a Remainer who voted Labour in the last election. If you are successfully elected, what will be your top priority as our MP? Karen Lee.
Climate change.
Okay, thank you. Carl McCartney.
Support Boris Johnson and get Brexit done.
Caroline Kenyon.
Stay at the heart of Europe for our economy, our NHS and the climate.
Sally Horse. Oh.
Tackling climate change and a second referendum on the deal or remain.
Reece Wilkes.
To deliver Brexit.
Rob Bradley.
I'd get people together, form a people's forum and set up the Lincoln strategy to address a lot of these problems that we've just been discussing.
Charles Shaw.
Right, well, I want to get Brexit done, but actually, given what we've just been talking about, I'd be really pleased if I could work towards Lincoln being a unitary authority of its own in the future, because I think Lincoln City needs to absolutely be that, and I accept the environmental imperative.
Excellent candidates. That was a good job.
I was the only one that did a quick question.
Owen Clark voted Labour in the last election. As the local MP, he asks, how would you tackle traffic congestion and parking issues in the city? Sally.
I think it's an easy one. Improve public transport. Get the cars off the road.
Caroline.
Well, I'm going to sound a bit of a parrot, but I absolutely agree. I was leafleting yesterday near the Carlton Centre. No buses, huge estates, very car dependent. Better public transport.
Karen.
3 ways. First of all, park and ride. For many years, the Conservative-controlled County Council have opposed it. Labour wants it. Second way, better cycle lane access. And third way, affordable, reliable public transport that's going to be free to under 25s and change the mindset of the next generation.
Carl McCartney.
Well, interestingly, when I was first stood for Parliament in 2005, I talked about a park and ride system for the city, and I talked about it being an all-encompassing park and ride system, maybe taking the model of Exeter, where I spent a summer working as a ground worker in 1986, or Chester or Glasgow are 2 other examples of very good park and ride systems. And funnily enough, during my 7 years as a Member of Parliament for Lincoln, the Labour-controlled City Council did not want to know about a park and ride system because most of their money is raised from car parking in the city centre.
Thank you. Charles Shaw.
Well, I absolutely support... Well, thanks, Karen. I absolutely support... All right, OK. No, I absolutely support the public transport argument. It's just 100% our line as the Liberal Party. But I must say, and not everybody will like this, but if you go to work for if you work for the county council, if you work for the city council, set an example. If you drive into the city and you don't need to, and we do have the public transport, get on it, and I'd be glad if the management would tell them to do so.
Rob Bradley.
Well, as I said before, we need a Lincoln strategy, and that can cover the economy and housing and everything else. And we need a fitness and health strategy for the people of Lincoln, so that there's more emphasis put on walking, cycling, not taking the kids to school 200 yards in the 4x4, and let's relieve the traffic that way.
Reece.
Well, Lincoln's a small city, to say the obvious, so as I agree with you, the walking is, instead of just going on in the car walking, public transport, electric buses, I think are going to be very important to stop the climate change issue and emissions.
Okay, thank you. We're doing very well with this, so I'll give you another one. Question inspired by William Norton, who didn't vote in the last election. Given the deadlock in Parliament over the past 2 years over such an important national issue, do you believe the current electoral system should be changed? Carl McCartney.
No, because I think first past the post works. When people who were told in 2016 it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to vote whether we should leave or stay, the ballot paper didn't say, well, it'll be a little bit of Remain or it'll be a little bit of Leave. It was basically clear. It was either vote to Remain or vote to leave. And the vast majority of people in this country and in this city voted to leave.
Okay.
It's the MPs who decided not to implement the will of the people.
Karen Lee.
I think
Karen Lee, thank you.
I think at the moment first past the post works, but the trouble is at the moment we're getting such close majorities that I think we need to at least look at PR, look and see if we can find something that works. That's not to say I would automatically think it was wonderful, but I'd be very willing to look at it.
Caroline.
Well, no surprise, Liberal Democrat, I'm absolutely committed to proportional representation. It's really striking. I stood in the EU elections in May and talking to people, everybody was engaged with it in a completely different way from how they are today because they felt every single vote counted. And I talk to people all over the country at the moment and before Thursday, and they're racked with anxiety about how to vote, and it's tactical voting and against people. This is not how a democracy should be. Every vote should count.
Sally.
First past the post is no longer fit for purpose, if indeed it ever was. Disenfranchises half the population. Lots of people feel that they have to tactically vote, so it doesn't give a true representation of what the country feels. The Green Party has campaigned for many, many years for a proper form of proportional representation, and I totally believe in that.
Rob.
I don't believe the party political system is right to run a country. The people down in the House of Commons should all be independent and they should all be working together. They shouldn't be working against each other, as we've witnessed tonight, some of this bickering and arguing. People should be working together for you, the people of this country, to reach the best outcome on every single subject.
Reece.
Okay. Well, I'm in favour of proportional representation. I believe that the current system, first past the post, it's not representative of the people. You're getting situations in one constituency, only 17%, overall 17% won by the vote. So sorry, 17%. The winning candidate got 17% of the vote itself. It's not taking into account the overall majority of people. In terms of tactical voting, this links in with the voting system because people feel that they need to vote for parties they don't even agree with.
Okay.
So, yeah, proportional representation, yeah.
Okay, Charles.
Right. Whoa. I do believe in parties, but I actually think it would be quite nice. There's an argument for actually being elected independents and deciding which group you're in when you get to Parliament, so that's another story. But the bottom line here is our party policy, the Liberal Party policy, as with most medium to small parties, is to support PR. However, I personally support first past the post.
Okay.
Just one line, if I don't mind. What
Very
is
quickly.
really important is that the electoral voting system, the papers you get, be corrected because you can corrupt any system. And at the moment, people like Rob, me, the Green, anyone else, suffer because everything is now in small print and you used to be able to vote for the person.
Okay, thank you. Right, we've motored through our quickfire questions. Let's now focus on another important issue. On to our next question from Luke Wallace, who voted Labour in the last election. Luke.
Hi, my name's Luke. I'm a youth work manager here in Lincoln. According to HMRC, 24.7% of children under 16 live in low-income families. My question is, if elected, what would you do for young people and children growing up in poverty? And would you be willing to meet with me and a group of young people to discuss some of the challenges that they face?
Karen Lee.
You say young people. I think everybody should have a living wage, right from the age of 16 onwards, not sort of over 21, that kind of thing. Where do you start with young people? The little ones. Bring back Sure Start centres. They took 1,000 of those away. Bring them back. That way you support the children that are living in poverty. Build homes that are environmentally sustainable. You're tackling climate change, you're providing jobs, and you're giving homes all at the same time. The Green Industrial Revolution just encompasses all of that. There are just so many things that Labour would do. A decent education system, you give people the best start in life. You know, lifelong education, their parents can train to do another job, and they can lift themselves out of poverty. There are just so many things. Youth services have been slashed. We need to put the money back into youth services. The NHS, people have got to be in good health to live good lives. This is why I say it's not just about one bit of public services, it's about all of the public services. And actually as well, local government's their funding has been slashed. Put that funding back in so that social services have got the money to do what they should be doing and supporting those families that need support. At the minute, it's just not happening.
Would you meet with Luke and the young people? Okay.
Monday.
Carl McCartney.
Certainly, and we look forward to meeting with you because I think that we're very lucky in this country that we do have a very good education system, and I think that leads to people being able to go wherever they want to do. There should never be any limit on aspiration. So in my time, both as a candidate, more recently, but certainly before 2010, and obviously also as the Member of Parliament for 7 years, I ensured that I did visit as many schools as I could within the constituency or invited them to come down to Westminster just to try and inspire young people. And I think it's great that obviously you're funded to do the work that you do and lots of other people do the same as you across the city. But I'd meet with you or any other people in the same line of work as yourself. And listening to young people is amazing. And sometimes you get the most direct and curveball questions from them as well, which is quite interesting.
Caroline Kenyon, what about yourself?
Well, Luke, I think it's a really great question. And just to go to the end of your question, I'm really delighted to meet with you at any time. In terms of Liberal Democrats and what we will do for young people in poverty, because I think that was your specific question, we want to reintroduce free school meals for all primary school children, which we brought in till year 3 in the coalition years, but we want to expand that for all children. More social housing. Children need to live in decent homes. There are so many hundreds of thousands of children. I think it's something like 400,000 children are going to be in temporary, really unsuitable housing over Christmas this year. And, you know, with threatening adults in the area, you know, it's just not appropriate. We've got to look after our children. They are vulnerable and they deserve and demand our care and protection. And social housing where they can live decently, but then also talking about the lady over here who was mentioning that people being 1 or 2 paychecks away from meltdown, you know, the mental health pressures of poverty. So supporting their parents who've got mental health issues, all of this feeds into why children end up living in poverty. Everything is so interwoven. You can't isolate one aspect. You've got to treat the whole. And I tell you something that really disturbed me, what my honourable neighbour said earlier, which didn't get picked up on. He said, I believe in the small state. That makes my blood run cold, because the small state ends up with Grenfell Tower.
Yep, hear,
hear. Luke, how do you feel about what you've heard?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you very much for agreeing to meet with me. I think you learn so much from meeting face to face with young people, and I absolutely agree. I think these services really need to be funded. Whether you're looking at high-level statistics about poverty in Lincoln, which is higher than the national average, or if you're meeting face to face with a 12-year-old who's growing up in a really desperate situation and understanding what their circumstances are. All I can say is I really hope that whoever out of you is successful will really prioritise the interests of young people, because they're not just part of our future, they're part of our society today, and I really hope you commit to that. Thank you.
take a couple of questions from the audience. Sorry to bring you the other side, Veronica, but there's a lady there with her hand up.
Thank you. I'm really sorry, Cole, but you are completely deluded about the education system. It is crumbling. We've got disenfranchised teachers, we've got a lack of resources, we've got parents putting in their own pockets to fund things that are going on. The cuts into education are disgusting, and we are failing our young children. We are actually growing problems for the future. And your comment just shows how disconnected you are with the local people and the local services.
Are you a teacher?
Yes, I am. I've worked in education in the county for over 30 years. I currently teach childcare, teaching assistants and childcare staff who train at Lincoln College. And every single week I hear the problems that they are facing. They have got oversized classes. They've got a lack of resources. They're losing staff on a very regular basis because the budgets just are not there. You strip the money back and you are failing our young children.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. Which point are you picking up on what Carl said?
I just think his comment around we have a great education system is just so deluded. It's so deluded.
Carl, do you want to come back on that?
Well, I'll reiterate, we do have a very good education system in this country. And
we have the lowest rankings in the OECD outcomes. We're the fifth richest country, one of the fifth richest countries in the world, and our OECD rankings are the lowest of all. We have the poorest outcomes for English and maths and future outcomes of our children.
Well, I'm not going to talk our country down, and I will repeat it for the third time and say that we have a very good educational system in this country. And actually, anybody who's in our education system, and they'll now be going through to 18, whether they stay at college. Well, I didn't go to Eton College. I don't think any of us up here actually did. But what's wrong with people who do go to Eton College? Good for people who do. You know, we should have lifelong learning in this country, something that we don't do. But certainly during the educational years of 3 through to 18, I think we have a very good education system in this country. And one of the things that the Conservative Party said that they're going to do is make sure that actually we bring the funding up so that through primary school, all children are going to have $4,000 per head and $5,000 for secondary school students. I don't think that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
Okay, gentleman there with his hand up, just...
Thank you very much. I think it's absolutely fabulous to be sitting here this evening hearing this wonderful group of people that are promising everything. I just wondered if they'd share with us the secrets of the magic money tree that they are all talking about.
Are you aiming that at anybody specifically?
I think Jeremy Corbyn, particularly Jeremy Corbyn's party.
Well, it is an interesting point, isn't it? Because
it's a very interesting point. We've absolutely costed our manifesto, and I've told you, we'll put the burden, taxation, on those who've got the broadest shoulders. But interestingly, after all that decade almost of austerity, the austerity that caused these very problems, when Boris Johnson wanted to get elected, and when he wants to get his Brexit done, all of a sudden, he's found the magic money tree.
Well, I mean, Carl McCartney made a point earlier on, which was, we all remember that note that was left in the Treasury. There's no money. And this was after a Labour administration.
Are you disputing that the bankers caused the global crash? And I have to say as well, I want to point out,
I'm not saying that.
Of all the things that we've talked about tonight, Mr. McCartney has not addressed social justice once.
But let's come back to the point which the gentleman was making, the magic money tree.
Yep.
All of this money has been promised by Labour to...
We'll tax those on over £80,000 a year. That's your answer. That's how we'll do it.
But that doesn't... we come back to the 50 billion. That's a lot of money, £50 billion for the WASPy pensions. Where is that money coming from?
That will be in the form of, as you'd have a one-off payment if you'd lost a court judgment. But not only are we going to tax the people who earn more than 80k, we're going to tax people like Google and Amazon, the ones who aren't paying the proper amount of tax.
Well, Bradley.
Just to give an independent view, and just to be completely different, which doesn't happen that often, I'm going to agree with someone on here, because sometimes in this sort of situation, we're trying to be impressive and we're trying to be different and we're competing with people on here. I'd agree fully with Karen about the Amazon situation. There's enough wealth in this country, or potential wealth in this country, to address the problems that young man has put across so eloquently. And by the way, if there was a people's forum, if there was a regular dialogue between the people and their representative, he wouldn't be asking this a question here tonight. Everybody would know about this and we'd start to be addressing it. But for Amazon and Google and Vodafone to use these tax loopholes to not pay tax that they could well afford, plus we have governments that invest in HS2 and Trident, when we've got these sort of situations, to me, as a simple, independent bloke, it seems absolutely ridiculous.
Karen, I asked Carl McCartney a question about his leader. I should ask a similar question from you. Given where Labour is in the polls, and I know the polls aren't scientific, they are only a guide, are Labour performing well enough with your leader?
Absolutely. And let's see the result on Thursday, shall we? You can make all sorts of predictions about the polls, that, you know, but until there's one poll that matters. And can I tell you, I wasn't predicted to win Lincoln last time, but I did.
Carl, you wanted to come back on what was said.
Well, just the gentleman who just asked the question, and also a gentleman at the back who said that actually, you know, the government of this country, the only money they get to spend is either what's raised through taxes or what's borrowed. And if you're going to be spending the money that the Labour Party seem to think that's going to be available, then it's not just our grandchildren, that's our great-grandchildren and their children who'll be paying back what the Labour money is going to squander. One of the reasons we had austerity was because of the parlous state of the nation's finances in 2010. We were the same as Greece. Now, it's only through the policies of, yes, a coalition government initially, but then from 2015 a Conservative government, that we now have more people in work. We see wages going up. And those people who pay wages, yes, are paying taxes. And my belief as a good Conservative is that we should be taking the least amount from people as taxes as possible, because the state shouldn't be deciding what everybody should do with their money. If you earn it, you should have the right to keep as much of it as possible and then decide what you spend it on.
Just go back to that gentleman. You've heard what the candidates are saying. How do you feel now?
Yeah, thank you very much. I look at myself and a lot of the people in this room as Labour's magic money tree. Unfortunately, we'll be taxed, even though, as myself, I'm retired, so I'm a pensioner, but the rest of us look after your wallet.
All right, let's hear from the gentleman with the beard in the middle.
Hi, I'm a teacher in a Lincoln primary school. I just wanted to bring it back to children for a second. Teachers across Lincoln are raising serious safeguarding issues regarding the home lives of children. And too often we're told that it doesn't meet threshold. Under this government, cuts have been absolutely massive to funding for children at risk of abuse and neglect. As a teacher, I've had so many sleepless nights worrying about children going home to certain situations. Just a question for Carl, as a member of the Conservative Party, do you have those sleepless nights about that issue?
Either as a candidate or in my former 7 years as a Member of Parliament, I had many sleepless nights about issues such as that and all sorts of other issues that people came to see me about as their Member of Parliament that they wanted to talk to me about. Some of them were safeguarding issues and to do with families and small children, as well as lots of other issues. You know, all of us here, whether it's me as a Conservative or any of the other party candidates here, we're all human and we've all got the same thoughts and processes that you go off, and we live in the same environment and the same city and the same country as you all in this audience, and we all get affected the same way as you do about certain issues.
All right. Very, very quickly.
Thank you. I just want to tie together a lot of what's been said, really. Ultimately, it's about what kind of country we want to be. We cannot have better services unless we pay more. It's a really simple truth, and we have to make that decision.
Okay. No, I'll tell you what, we're going to move on because time's getting short, and I do want to get this next question in because it is very important. Certainly not the least in terms of important, even though it is the last one. This one from Lynn Allison, who voted Green at the last election, which gives you a clue where we're going with this. Is Lynn Allison here? Yes, there she is. Thank you.
Climate change will have an immense impact in Lincolnshire, with 150,000 people expected to lose their homes imminently in towns like Skegness, Boston and Cleethorpes. What are you specifically promising to do to prevent the climate crisis from getting even worse?
Let me go to our Green candidate first.
It's a huge problem. We have to tackle the climate crisis. It's got to be the most urgent thing. A huge subject, loads and loads of ways of doing it. We have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That has to be one of our first targets. But at the same time, we have to deal with the effects of climate change, and flooding particularly has been quite recent. I live very close to the river. I was watching it go up quite a lot. Too much to go into detail, really, here. I could get very, very involved on beavers, how to tackle flooding here by absorbing water high up. Peat bogs are important. I could go on and on and on and on. So yes, we have to tackle climate change. We have to put measures in place for that. We have to reduce our our greenhouse gas emissions. It's not going to be easy. Nobody can tell you it's going to be easy. Public transport, get cars off the road, reduce sustainable housing, better insulation. The Green Party would provide funding for small businesses to improve their emissions and impact on the environment.
Okay.
So lots and lots and lots of small ways and
Okay.
big ways of coping with it.
Carl McCartney.
Back in 2007, when I was the candidate before I was first elected in 2010, David Cameron visited Lincoln because of the problem with flooding from runoff in Stamp End, and obviously dealing with the issues then and what could be done by the various agencies, led by the Environment Agency and also the County Council, to ensure that that wouldn't happen again, or at least would be mitigated for, was something I worked at for many years. More recently, with the flooding that we had outside of Lincoln, but actually the farmland that was flooded saved some of the properties in Lincoln. I've ensured that we've had access as a city to various funding from central government to increase our flood defences, and also in my time fought for Lincolnshire. So the question you asked about what was happening on the coast, obviously Boston, Skegness and all the way up and down the coast, Mablethorpe, all the other areas. Sometimes you have to work together with the other MPs for areas that you don't necessarily represent. But actually all the MPs in Lincolnshire wanted to make sure that, because ultimately, you know, water can, whether it's coming from tidal flows or whether it's coming from runoff from rainfall, can affect Lincoln, because there's only two ways that water can get through Lincoln. And we could open it out into a much bigger question to talk about the Western Growth Corridor and whether that's a good idea or not. Some of us think it isn't. But the other things that I would talk about when it comes to pollution and the environment in Lincoln is ensuring the traffic flows rather than sits stagnant in traffic jams is one of the ways forward to improve our environment in the city.
Karen Lee.
All the things that I've already said about the green revolution, building houses that are environmentally sustainable, upgrading the ones that we've already got, changing the way we travel, park and ride, cycle lanes, affordable, reliable public transport and trains. And actually Labour are going to allocate money towards flood defences, because the Tories cut that. The floods have been actually worse than they needed to have been. So we put money into fighting flood defences, improving them so that that doesn't happen again. And we'd make floods a statutory duty for the fire service. At the moment, they tackle floods, but they don't actually get a budget for it. How ridiculous is that? You've got to... The only way you will ever get decent public services is if you pay for them.
Caroline.
Well, Liberal Democrats, we want to put 100 billion in the lifetime of the Parliament into tackling the climate emergency, and it really is an emergency. We want to have all new cars to be electric by 2030, 80% of electricity to be generated from renewables, and we have a really good track record on that. We also want to bring back the Green Investment Bank. It's a tragedy that that was started by Vince Cable in the coalition years, and then after 2015 it got sold off to the Australians, because that was pumping investment money into business. There is an economic opportunity for those who want to seize it, a commercial opportunity in greening Britain and making us in a much safer and better place to tackle the environmental headwinds that are coming our way.
Thank you. Let's quickly go to the audience. This gentleman here.
Excuse me, Karen, you mentioned earlier that you've been out to various local businesses that are concerned by trade tariffs and taxation that will be as a result of Brexit. I'm just intrigued as how the Labour Party think raising corporation tax by 35% is the answer to that.
Well, we are talking about climate change.
We're talking about climate change.
As you've raised the question, very briefly.
Well, corporation tax, we plan to raise it to 26%, which is actually less than what it is right across Europe.
Okay.
And again, it's another one of those ways, if you want decent public services, they have to be paid for.
Right. Gentleman there, hopefully on climate change. Gentleman's got his hand up. Do you want to come back?
I do want to come back.
Okay.
We've already got 7,000 homes at flood risk in Lincoln, so do we think putting another 3,000 on a floodplain in the Western Growth Corridor is a good move?
Okay. Charles?
Right, I can incorporate my other answer with that. No, I don't think it is. We just keep ignoring it each year. There's nothing you can say to building on the floodplains. The Lib Dems have used the word bollocks in another context, which I don't agree with them on, but I do in this. No, wait a minute. I do agree in relation to building on floodplains. We've got to stop it, really, full stop. Just a quick point there. Also, the question before was about what we were going to do. I've heard all the talks about education earlier. The earth is like a massive melon, and we are just maggots eating away at it. And unless we control how we behave, all these other things you're asking us about won't count for much.
Okay.
If you throw water bottles away, if you do other things, you've got a problem.
Thank you. Rob?
I'm not going to repeat what everybody else has said about the measures that need to be taken. I think those that governors need to completely and fully admit that it is a crisis. I'm not sure everyone down in the House of Commons thinks so. And I think there should be, because it's so serious, an all-party approach. I'd have Caroline Lucas leading that, because she is one of the very few impressive people down there. She shouldn't be on her own down in the House of Commons when it comes to such an important subject. So all parties, forget your differences and let's work towards this massive problem.
A final word from Rhys Wilkes.
Climate change is pretty much the most important thing of our time, without question. It's estimated around near 1 tree in its lifetime can absorb around over 1 ton of CO2. So we need to plant as many trees as possible. Also, in terms of, for instance, lighting and electric, if you change to your lighting to LED, it's estimated that you could save around near 80% on lighting from incandescent lamps, which would equate to around near £240 a year. So LED lighting is very important.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Rhys. Right, time literally has run out, so it's time for our candidates' closing remarks. Are we saying 60 seconds is enough? 90 seconds, okay. I tried. 90 seconds. Karen.
Thank you, everyone, for giving me the opportunity to talk to you all tonight. It's been a real pleasure. And I hope I've persuaded you that this election isn't, as some might have you think, all about Brexit. It's about what kind of Lincoln you want to see going forward. A Lincoln with a bright future, one with jobs which pay a living wage so that everyone can pay their bills, where everyone can live in a warm, safe home with food to eat, and one where we have enough police officers, enough teachers, enough firefighters, and one where, you know, if you become ill and you need the National Health Service, you won't have to pay for it. But most important of all for me, it's probably the last chance to address climate emergency before it's too late. And I've worked hard as Lincoln's MP for 2.5 years to be your voice in Westminster. I was born in Lincoln and I've lived here for all of my life. For many years I worked at the local hospital and I'm Lincoln through and through. I can't bear to see the level of poverty that we see on our streets at the moment over the last decade. Seeing people sleeping on our streets, seeing people hungry. It is time for change. And if you, like me, want to see a kinder and fairer Lincoln, you'll vote Labour on Thursday.
Rob Bradley.
A vote for people, not politics is, yes, a protest vote, but it's not a wasted one. An independent representative working hard with the people of this city will, I believe, achieve far more than a politician who has to toe the party line. I won't be told how to think or how to vote. Instead, I'll do the best thing possible. I'll listen. Together, we can compile a plan for Lincoln. We'll set out what the current situation is in all areas: health, employment, business, housing, traffic and transport, and much more. We'll agree what needs attention and work out our strategies together to improve them. People have lost trust in those who rule the roost. They don't feel they can trust them anymore. We never get to know the real facts. Sound bites and squabbling takes precedent over sustainability and success. The saddest thing, though, is that millions of people will go to the polls on Thursday trying to work out who is the least worst to vote for. Are the current leaders of the main parties, and in fact those who are connected to them, really the best thing we can do? I think a vote for me is the best option. Lest that sounds big-headed, let me quickly add that a vote for me as your independent candidate is in actual fact to vote for you yourselves, the people of Lincoln. You can have a proper voice and an independent messenger, and together we can do the very best for this beautiful city of ours. 2 more final things. Number 1, have a great Christmas. Number 2, support your local football club, especially
Thank
Lincoln
you.
United.
Sally Horscroft.
Thank you for all your questions. You've heard from us all on many issues, but quite honestly, and politicians must be honest with you, vital as all these issues are for people's well-being and for our society, none of it matters if we don't also tackle climate change. We are living through a climate emergency. The planet is at breaking point and urgent action is needed now, not in 2050, not in 2045 or even 2030, but now. The science tells us we have less than 10 years in which to take action, and the public understand this need for urgent action, but our governments have failed to take the essential action needed and have failed us. We need to invest in creativity and innovation, in nature, and in new solutions to combat climate change. The Green Party will invest in clean energy sources, in reducing energy requirements, in sustainable housing, in improving our public transport and other measures urgently needed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Business as usual is no longer an option. It's time for fresh thinking, and there are solutions out there. And the Green Party is the party with the environment at the heart of its policies, the policies needed for the change needed. And it is time for that change. If not now, then when? Thank you.
Charles Shaw.
Right, well, we've heard quite a lot about trust and putting the power to the people and things to that effect. I'd like actually to ask you something quite different. Is when you go home, read all the election material, look it up again on the internet, even listen to this discussion we've had today, and decide how much of things actually ring fair and true to what you know. And if you've been involved in asking a question and you didn't actually know the facts before you asked the question, go and look up, like the things about the Treasury, go and look up what each government spends. Don't just say Labour did this, Tories did that, or something else. Actually have a good look. The Liberal Democrats, that's because there was one once, you see. The Liberal society is one in which every citizen shall possess liberty, property and security, and none shall be enslaved by poverty, ignorance or conformity. But its chief care is for the rights and opportunities of the individual, and in all spheres it sets freedom first. Because you can have all this security and no freedom, and we've got to balance these two things out in the type of democracy we have. So on that one, I think I'm running out of my time. On the environment one, I'd just like to make it clear that our party totally and utterly opposes fracking and opposes built-in obsolescence on products. Thank you.
Very good. Carl McCartney.
Thank you very much, Rob. I had a positive vision for Lincoln in the time I was the candidate before I was elected in 2010, and I delivered on the mantra of putting Lincoln first. It was such a good mantra that it's been plagiarised by other candidates. And that's because every single one of us who stands up here, if we're lucky enough to be elected, should put the city first and the people of the city to ensure it's an even better place than it already is, whether that is transport infrastructure, whether that is in education, whether that's in the services that we might have. Those are the things that I fought for, that I ensured that we received here in Lincoln, and if I'm lucky enough to be elected on Thursday, I will make sure that we'll have again. Those are the things I wanted. You've heard that it isn't about Brexit. It is about Brexit. It's one of the only reasons we're having this general election, because some of the people up here lied to you back in 2017. The Labour Party said that they would deliver Brexit, and they've done everything they can for 2.5 years to ensure that it hasn't happened. Boris Johnson has said that we're going to deliver Brexit, we're going to move the country forward, and we're going to move on to a great domestic agenda. Thank you very much indeed for your time tonight. Cheers.
Caroline Kenyon.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to you, because you have actually been a really fantastic audience. You have been so thoughtful, you've shared your experience, and in all honesty, you have made me think. This isn't just a process where I sit up here with my colleagues and we talk at you. You have made me think and you made me reflect. And as I drive home tonight, I will think about the things that you've made me really sort of question in my own mind. We all care about our city and our country, but we differ in the ways that we see the solutions. For me, being a Liberal Democrat is about being outward-looking, inclusive, internationalist, because I believe that is absolutely the best way to solve all of our problems, whether they are rare illnesses for children. We have 36 pan-European committees looking at rare diseases for children, 6 of which were chaired by British doctors. They've all had to step down. What a tragedy for this country. 2 orchestras have left London because we are not going to be part of the EU. We need to be part of the greater whole, and that is where I see our destiny, and I'm really proud as a Liberal Democrat to say that that is where we should be. The referendum result immediately flashed these warning bells in my mind that it would affect those who got least worst. And so, as decent, good human beings, I say to you, vote Liberal Democrat, vote for everyone, not for the few, not for the many, for everyone.
Thank you. And Rhys Wilkes.
So, Brexit now is what value do we place on democracy? What value are we placing on referendums and elections? I've heard many different arguments about remaining in the EU. I've heard people say people didn't know what they were voting for, which is really patronising. I've heard other arguments, which is it's been 3 years and therefore we should rerun the game, essentially. But it's only been 3 years because it's been frustrated by Remainers to begin with. So it's a very disingenuous argument. Well, I mean, Labour really haven't helped this. They've well, that's
let me let him finish. Thank you.
Labour's gonna renegotiate a deal and then campaign against it. So they're gonna get the worst deal possible.
Can we just
if they're
let him
against
finish?
it?
Thank you.
So yeah.
Do you want to just finish, Rhys? You want to get through your address?
Yeah. So I've been interrupted. So yeah, we need to get Brexit delivered. We need to honour the result of the referendum, and we can move on. Thank you.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our election debate. A little bit later than advertised, so I'm in for a telling off. But I think it's been worth it because we've had a really, really good, interesting and incisive debate. And thank you to the audience. Thank you to our candidates. All that remains now is that you exercise your democratic right to vote on Thursday. BBC Radio Lincolnshire will have reporters at all of the counts, bringing you the results as soon as they become known. We'll have a live election programme on the night, and Scott Dalton will be getting up an hour earlier on Friday morning with an extended breakfast show to bring you the whole story of the general election 2019. And also stay tuned for the results on the Lincolnite on the night itself. This has been brought to you by the BBC Radio Lincolnshire and the Lincolnite. Audience and candidates, give yourselves a round of applause. If you've still not made up your mind how to vote, let's get some deeper analysis now on what's been said tonight from our spin room and Michael Horton.
Thank you very much. I wasn't expecting to do it to an audience. There we go. We've got our political reporter, Sharon Edwards. What have you made of what you heard tonight, Sharon?
I think we've seen the usual fault lines opened up on issues like Brexit and the economy. We've obviously seen the Labour candidate challenged over the Labour's economic plans and spent